December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor, a date that would live in infamy. As smoke rose from burning battleships and America reeled from the devastating surprise attack, one man had an idea. An idea so bizarre, so seemingly absurd, that it sounds like something from a cartoon. What if America could strike back at Japan using millions of bats? Not just any bats, bats carrying tiny napalm bombs. Bats that would infiltrate Japanese cities under cover of darkness, roost in the wooden buildings, and then ignite thousands of fires simultaneously across a 40-mile radius. This is the true story of Project X-Ray, the bat bomb, a secret weapon that actually worked, maybe too well, when it accidentally burned down an entire American military base during testing. This is a story about desperate innovation, in unintended consequences, and the day the United States military went to war with flying mammals as their secret weapon. Dr. Lytle Slee Adams was a dental surgeon from Pennsylvania. Not exactly the kind of person you'd expect to design a revolutionary weapon. But Adams had connections. He was an acquaintance of First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, which meant he had a direct line to the White House. He knew that Japanese cities were built primarily of wood, bamboo, and paper, highly flammable materials. He knew that bats roosted in attics, eaves, and hidden corners before dawn, and he realized, what if you could attach small incendiary bombs to millions of these bats? What if you could drop them over Japanese cities and let nature do the rest? In his own words, Adams believed that the bat was the lowest form of animal life and that bats had been created by God to await this hour to play their part in the scheme of free human existence. It was, skeptically, not the most scientifically rigorous reasoning, but Adams was convinced, and he had access to power. In January 1942, barely a month after Pearl Harbor, Adams wrote a letter to the White House explaining his idea. You have to imagine the scene, a White House staffer opening mail and finding a proposal to weaponize bats. Most people would have thrown it in the trash, but the letter reached President Franklin D. Roosevelt, and Roosevelt, remarkably, didn't dismiss it. His response? This man is not a nut. It sounds like a perfectly wild idea, but is worth looking into. Just like that, Project X-Ray was born. The military assigned the project to the National Defense Research Committee. Adams was given authorization to assemble a team and begin research. The Army Air Force would oversee development. Adams recruited an eclectic group: mammalogists, chemists, engineers, and a young filmmaker named Jack Kufer, who would document the entire project. Kufer was just 17 years old when he was drafted and assigned to the bat bomb team. Decades later, he'd write a book about the experience, one of the only detailed accounts we have. The team had to solve several enormous problems. First, which species of bat should they use? They needed a bat that was abundant, easy to capture, and strong enough to carry a small bomb. After testing several species, they settled on the Mexican free-tailed bat. These bats were perfect. They lived in massive colonies, millions in single caves. They were small but strong, capable of carrying a payload 3 times their own body weight, and they were everywhere in the American Southwest. Next problem: what kind of bomb could fit on a bat? A Mexican free-tailed bat weighs about 9 grams, roughly the weight of 2 pennies. That meant any incendiary device had to weigh no more than 15 to 18 grams and still pack enough destructive power to start a serious fire. Enter Louis Fieser, a brilliant Harvard chemist who had just invented something new: napalm. Napalm was a gel-like substance made from gasoline mixed with a special thickening agent. Once ignited, it burned at extremely high temperatures and was nearly impossible to extinguish. It was the perfect weapon for the bat bomb. Feezer designed what they called the H2 unit, a tiny celluloid capsule containing napalm, equipped with a time delay fuse. The device was attached to the bat's chest using a surgical clip and string. The theory was elegant. The bat would chew through the string while roosting, releasing the fuse. 30 minutes later, boom, fire. But how do you actually deploy millions of bats from an aircraft? The team designed a bomb-shaped canister with compartments, over 1,000 tiny slots, each containing one hibernating bat. The canister would be dropped from a bomber at high altitude. As it fell, a parachute would deploy at around 4,000 feet, slowing the descent. Here's the clever part. The bats would be in hibernation when loaded into the canister, kept dormant by refrigeration. But as the canister descended through warmer air, the bats would naturally wake up. At about 1,000 feet altitude, the canister would open like a flower, releasing the bats in all directions. The bats would disperse across a 20 to 40-mile radius, seeking shelter in buildings as dawn approached. They'd roost in attics, under eaves, inside walls, exactly the places where fires would be hardest to detect and fight. And then, as the city slept, thousands of small fires would ignite simultaneously throughout the urban area. On paper, it was brilliant. Well, in practice, that's where things got interesting. The Bat Bomb team set up operations in the American Southwest, near the caves where millions of Mexican free-tailed bats lived. They began capturing bats by the thousands, using nets on long poles. They'd sweep them out of the air as they emerged from caves at dusk. The captured bats were placed in refrigerated trucks and cooled to about 40 degrees Fahrenheit. In that temperature, the bats entered hibernation, a state of torpor that made them easy to handle. While hibernating, technicians would carefully attach the tiny H2 incendiary devices to each bat's chest using surgical clips. It was painstaking work, delicate, and, when you're dealing with thousands of bats, incredibly time-consuming. Testing began at a facility in Bandera, Texas, then moved to Carlsbad, New Mexico, right near the famous caverns where Adams had first gotten his inspiration. Early tests did not go well. In the first trials, many bats never woke up from hibernation. The team had miscalculated the temperature requirements. Bats that didn't warm up enough simply plummeted to the ground, still asleep, and died on impact. It turns out that bat biology wasn't well understood in the 1940s. The team was learning as they went, essentially conducting groundbreaking research into bat behavior while simultaneously trying to turn them into weapons. They refined the process, adjusted temperatures, improved the canister design, conducted more drops. And then, in May 1943, they decided to test the bats with live incendiary devices. This is where things went spectacularly wrong. May 15th, 1943. Carlsbad Army Airfield Auxiliary Air Base, New Mexico. A brand new installation, freshly constructed for the Army Air Corps. State-of-the-art facilities, control tower, barracks, hangars, the pride of the desert. The Bat Bomb team was conducting a test with armed bats, real H2 incendiary devices attached, fuses active. Someone left a door open. Several bats, fully armed with live napalm bombs, escaped. They did exactly what bats do naturally. They looked for dark, sheltered places to roost. They found the air traffic control tower, the barracks, the hangars, and critically, they roosted under a fuel tank. 30 minutes later, the time delay fuses activated. The base erupted in flames. The fire spread rapidly through the newly constructed buildings. The control tower burned. Barracks were consumed. The fuel tank exploded in a massive fireball. And because the project was classified top secret, firefighting resources couldn't be fully deployed. They had to let sections of the base burn to protect the secrecy of the project. When the smoke cleared, the brand-new Carlsbad airfield was a charred ruin. The base commander was not pleased. There he was with a state-of-the-art facility, and a bunch of scientists had just burned it down with weaponized bats. In one final indignity, a couple of armed bats had roosted under the general's staff car. When their incendiaries detonated, they took the car with them. The official report dryly noted that testing was concluded when a large portion of the test material destroyed. But here's the thing, the test had actually proven that the concept worked. Maybe too well.
After the Carlsbad disaster, the Army Air Force decided they wanted nothing more to do with the bat bomb project. Understandable, given that it had just incinerated one of their bases. But Adams refused to give up. He lobbied everyone he could find, and in August 1943, the U.S. Navy took over the project, officially renaming it Project X-ray and assigning it to the Marine Corps for further development. The Marines moved operations to El Centro, California, and later to the Dugway Proving Ground in Utah. They refined the procedures, improved the canister design, perfected the temperature control for bat hibernation. They also built something remarkable at Dugway, a complete Japanese village. Not just a few buildings, an entire mock city with authentic Japanese architectural construction. Traditional wooden houses, paper walls, thatched roofs, everything built to exact specifications. In December 1943, the Marines conducted the definitive test. They dropped bat bombs over the replica village. The bats dispersed. They roosted in attics and eaves exactly as predicted. The incendiaries activated, and the village burned completely. Multiple fires ignited simultaneously throughout the structures. The flames spread rapidly through the wooden construction. Within minutes, the entire mock city was an inferno. The chief of incendiary testing at Dugway wrote, "A reasonable number of destructive fires can be started in spite of the extremely small size of the units. The main advantage would be their placement within enemy structures without the knowledge of the householder or fire watchers, thus allowing the fire to establish itself before being discovered." On a weight-for-weight basis, the bat bomb was actually more effective than standard incendiary bombs. One analysis suggested conventional bombs might start 167 to 478 fires per bomb load, while the bat bomb could start 3,625 to 4,748 fires. The weapon worked. Project X-ray was declared an effective weapon. Plans were made for mass production, 1 million incendiary devices, with full deployment scheduled for mid-1944. And then it was cancelled.
Fleet Admiral Ernest J. King, Chief of Naval Operations, reviewed the project status in late 1944. When he learned that the bat bombs wouldn't be combat-ready until mid-1945, he made a decision. Cancel it immediately. By that point, the project had cost about $2 million, equivalent to roughly $35 million today. 2 years of research, thousands of hours of work, groundbreaking studies into bat biology, engineering innovations. But another secret project was moving faster, the Manhattan Project. Adams later recounted a bewildering conversation with a general about appropriations. Some general I met regarding appropriations confused our secret project with another secret project that's apparently going on somewhere. It's the silliest nonsense you ever heard of. That silly nonsense was the atomic bomb. While Adams's team was perfecting the art of attaching napalm to bats, scientists at Los Alamos were splitting atoms. By the time the bat bomb was ready for deployment, the atomic bomb had leapfrogged it entirely. On August 6th and 9th, 1945, atomic bombs destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japan surrendered. The war ended. But Adams never stopped believing his weapon would have been more humane. He argued that bat bombs could have achieved strategic objectives without the massive civilian casualties of atomic weapons. Think of thousands of fires breaking out simultaneously over a circle of 40 miles in diameter for every bomb dropped. Japan could have been devastated, yet with small loss of life. Was he right? We'll never know.